The chances that Kyle Schwarber signs with the Reds are greater than you think, but still require Cincinnati to overcome one massive hurdle. Welcome into the Locked On Reds podcast. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 podcast network or sports podcast network in the country. And we want to thank you for helping us make that happen. Hi, my name is Jeff Carr. I'm a lifelong Cincinnati Reds fan, and I've been podcasting about this team for 7 seasons now, bringing you takes you won't hear anywhere else here on Locked On Reds. And on today's show, we're going to be talking a lot about Kyle Schwarber. Later on, we'll talk about, what if the Reds don't get Kyle Schwarber, which still feels like the majority possibility. But there are other options out there to make this lineup better. I'll tell you my favorites later on in the show. In just a few minutes, I will tell you the best Reds lineup with Kyle Schwarber and what that looks like. It might not be exactly what you think it is, but we will begin with why we cannot shake these rumors as the smoke continues around this fire of a rumor. And that's all in today's episode that is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long. All right, the rumor continues. The idea of Kyle Schwarber coming to Cincinnati continues to be a possibility, and I think it's more so than we want to imagine, because there's still multiple things that are telling us that this could happen. Now, some of these are coming from national reporters, so there's a little bit of grain of salt that you have to take these with, but there was also something that I've heard from another team, and it's all pointing to the fact that this is a reality. It's still just the Reds have to get over the money thing. Now, I want to start with this because I really trust Jeff Passan's reporting, and Jeff Passan posted on Threads the other day, said Kyle Schwarber, the bellwether of the class. Schwarber's market is healthy. He's going to get years. He's going to get AAV, and at this point, he might be the likeliest of the big free agents to sign first. Unclear if something gets done before the winter meetings, but I'd be surprised if they end the winter meetings and he doesn't have a team. The Phillies remain the favorite, with Boston, Cincinnati, and the Mets, and others in the mix. I find it intriguing. And obviously, Philadelphia is the favorite. I've said it all along. I think if you were to tell me I had to put a ton of money on where it is that Kyle Schwarber's going to go, he's just going to stay in Philadelphia. But I think it's interesting that Cincinnati is named in that mix of teams that are interested as well, because obviously the Mets are interested. The Mets are interested in everybody. Steve Cohen is interested in paying for a roster that is even more so than the Dodgers. Boston is interested because Boston needs a big bat, and Kyle Schwarber's been there before, and they know him. But Cincinnati being mentioned in the teams that are close to the Phillies is very intriguing to me, coming from Jeff Passan, because that doesn't feel like hype. That doesn't feel like empty calories, as it were. You know, I love talking about food. It doesn't feel like it's nothing. I think that there's a lot to this where it's like, all right, there's interest that the Reds have in him. There's interest that Kyle Schwarber has in becoming a Red. It's just, can they get over the hurdle of money? Can the Reds offer him a contract that, let's be clear, would be the largest free agent contract the Reds ever gave to anybody by a wide margin? The Reds have only ever given out a total contract record of $64 million. And of course, that was to Jeimer Candelario. But when it comes to what they would have to offer Kyle Schwarber, he would eclipse $64 million after 2 years. Well, maybe 3, depending on who you say. There's some that are saying that he could get 25. There's some that are saying that he could get 30 per year. And most are thinking 4 or 5 years. He's going to be 33 this season. That still makes plenty of sense for me, for a guy that's going to pretty much be your DH 99% of the time. So I think ultimately the money is where we are sticking with here. That's the problem when it comes to the Reds. It's always the problem, right? Like when we talk about the Reds getting better, we say, yeah, but do they have enough money to do it? Kyle Schwarber would make them immensely better. We'll talk about why I think the lineup moves in a way that it should with Kyle Schwarber in just a few minutes. But the fact that there's still so much chatter about this, and it's not just the national guys. I mean, even looking at one of the other national guys on MLB.com, Todd Zalecki, he's a reporter for MLB.com, said in an article the other day that Philadelphia is not close to a deal with Kyle Schwarber to bring him back. And there were reports back in February before last season that Kyle Schwarber wanted to sign a contract extension with Philadelphia, and Philadelphia didn't do it. Philadelphia did not come up with a deal that he wanted. Here we are again with this opportunity, and more reports are coming out that they're not close. There's something about this that seems to be blocking Philadelphia away. And then I heard the other day from a contact inside a rival team's front office who said that the Reds have legitimate interest in bringing in Kyle Schwarber to, quote, just hammer the ball. Oh my, sign me up on that. And that's a lot of like, okay, all of this makes sense, right? It all makes sense. It's just like what Mark Feinsand said on MLB.com, where he said Schwarber hails from nearby Middletown, Ohio. And while free agents don't tend to base their decisions on a desire to return home, it's the one thing that the Cincinnati Reds can offer that no other team can. And he has expressed multiple different times in interviews, as Kyle Schwarber, of, yeah, I'd love to play for my hometown team. And Cincinnati needs a big bat, Mark Feinsand continues to go on and say, and while it remains to be seen whether the Reds will be willing to spend what it's going to take to land Schwarber, it's the perfect fit. There's not a soul who covers baseball on this earth that disagrees Kyle Schwarber to Cincinnati is a good fit. They all believe it. We all know it. This lineup needs power. He had all the power last year, more power than any other player. Well, in the National League. This lineup needs protection for Elly De La Cruz. There's nobody better to do it than Kyle Schwarber. You just have to make the dollars make sense. And for me, I feel like the Reds are able to do this if they finagle some things. I think that they could potentially offer him a deal that down the way would work out for them. They could do a little bit of deferred money, not Shohei Ohtani deferred money, not Los Angeles Dodgers deferred money, but think about what the economics of baseball may change into in the next couple of years. They should be able to afford something like this. And on the other side of this, you could trade Brady Singer for prospects and get rid of whatever that contract's going to be. We've seen somewhere between $11 and $13 million for next year for Brady Singer. So you could get that off the books, open up half of probably what it would take to get Kyle Schwarber, and then you use half of your available free agency money, which is somewhere between 20 and 25 million. I tend to probably believe it's more closer to 20 million. So, okay, you use half that, maybe a little bit over half of that, and you get the deal done. And you bring Schwarber home. He sells 1 million jerseys, and there's just so much goodwill that the Reds could build with this move. I don't think they understand how excited this city would get if Kyle Schwarber was coming here. I've told a couple of people this over text message, and I said I still don't want to believe that it is a possibility, but if it happens, I'll try to do a backflip on camera. And that would probably be a bad idea, and you'd be looking for another host of Locked On Reds, and Steve would be all sad. But I would be through the roof if this were to come true. Because the biggest part of all of it is the Reds spending money. Will they do that? Because the fit is clear. The benefits are enormous. And I quite frankly think that this is the exact move that would win the offseason. It would be an A-plus offseason if you go get Kyle Schwarber. I could deal with the bullpen. I could deal with the outfield. If you bring in a dude like this that makes your lineup just that much better, go do it. Go do it right now. I'm really getting fired up just thinking about this. This would be amazing if the Reds could pull this off this offseason. And, like, putting him in the lineup, I think a lot of people are like, okay, cleanup hitter. But the lineup should look a certain way with Kyle Schwarber in it. I'm going to tell you what that looks like coming up next. But first, I want to tell you that when it comes to this NFL season, live betting on FanDuel is the way to go. Because as the game moves along, there's so many different things that change the momentum of everything, and you can get in on all of it over on FanDuel. Whether it's, the point spread and how it changes, because this weekend I'm really looking at this point spread between the Bengals and the Bills. Right now, the Bills are favored by 5.5. I think that's going to move a lot during the game, because as other teams score, the point spread changes. And I really feel like if the Bills score first, the point spread is going to be in a position where I really like the Bengals to cover it, if not get that upset. They're kind of to the point, if they win out, they could win the division. So every game is a playoff game from here on out. 5.5 points seems interesting, but the live bet is really where I'm going to live, and I'm going to live on that on FanDuel. You should too. Throughout the entire NFL season, FanDuel's the place to go for your live betting. They even got live bets on NBA games and college football, college basketball games. Got to check out FanDuel today. Thanks for making Locked On Reds part of your everyday routine. If you're not an everydayer, which, by the way, thank you to our everydayers, and you don't make us your first listen, hit the subscribe button right here on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, because we're free and available everywhere you get your podcasts. All right, so I think that a lot of folks would be like, okay, Schwarber, clean up, we're good to go. I disagree. I think that if the Reds were to add Kyle Schwarber, the top three of the lineup should be TJ Friedl until proven otherwise because of his on-base ability. Then you have Elly De La Cruz batting second. Then you have Kyle Schwarber batting third. And then you let the rest of the chips fall where they may. I think that Sal Stewart would be a very interesting lineup protector for Kyle Schwarber, because that's going to be the next question, right? Like, once you bring in Kyle Schwarber to the Reds, how is he just not going to get intentionally walked 4 times a day, and so teams don't have to face him at Great American Ballpark? You put Sal Stewart behind him, because Sal Stewart's going to be lineup protection for Kyle Schwarber. And so I think that your top 4 should be Friedl, Elly, Schwarber, Sal Stewart. Now, there's an argument to be made, and I remember he did this in Chicago. I think he did this in Boston too, to put Kyle Schwarber in the leadoff spot. That would be intriguing, because he gets on base a ton and he hits the ball a ton, and you can't pitch around the leadoff guy, right? But I would argue, if you're going to do that, just put Elly leadoff and then bat Kyle Schwarber second, and then put Sal Stewart third. I think that those 3 guys need to be together in this lineup, in this hypothetical lineup that would exist if Kyle Schwarber comes here. But think of what the Reds get with Kyle Schwarber. They get 56 rally killings, home runs from last year. Everydayers will know that. But they get a guy who immediately ups the profile of their lineup exponentially, because they were league average. I think a lot of us tend to believe that the Reds lineup was historically bad last year, and that's not true. The biggest problem with their lineup last year is that they were the most mid that mid can be. They were league average in batting average as a team. They were league average in on-base percentage. They were just a little bit below league average in slugging percentage. They were league average in runs per game. They were league average in everything, really. There was nothing about their game that they were horrible at, but there was also nothing about their game, as far as the lineup is concerned, that the Reds were good at. They were just mid. So Kyle Schwarber jumps you up at least into the top 10 of rankings when it comes to that, because he satisfies a lot of different things that the Reds desperately needed. They needed clutch hitting with runners in scoring position. Kyle Schwarber was amazing at that. They needed power. Kyle Schwarber was amazing at that. Kyle Schwarber had more RBIs than anybody in the National League. I mean, I really think that this would be just a home run. There's mutual interest. We know that Kyle Schwarber wants to come home. We know that the Reds want to bring him home, but the Reds just need to pony up the dollars. Just do that. Because everybody was talking about, well, and I agree, quite frankly, outside of the whole, homecoming nostalgia feeling that you can pitch to Kyle Schwarber on top of whatever money you give him, that's the guy that you can really get that's off the top shelf in the free agent market. Otherwise, the Reds are doing their normal thing where they're looking for bargains, they're looking for reclamation projects. So then you say, okay, their best chance of upgrading the lineup is through trade. This is the one move that the Reds can make that they wouldn't have to trade anybody away to get better. They could keep Hunter Green, not worry about anything. They could keep the rest of their starting rotation intact, except for Brady Singer. But I would agree that Brady Singer, with everybody else healthy, probably loses a rotation spot. That's another podcast, though. But I think that ultimately this move would make a ton of sense. And when you put him in the lineup, he is your protection for Elly, but he definitely needs to be hitting in the first inning every single game. So he can't bat fourth. He's got to bat third. And Elly's got to hit second, or Elly hits first, Kyle Schwarber hits second. Whatever the case might be, Elly and Kyle Schwarber need to hit in the first inning. I would shudder to think of a lineup where we're not getting to Kyle Schwarber. Like, God forbid they go 3 and out every time in the first inning. But if you go 3 and out in the first inning and then Kyle Schwarber is leading off in the second inning, I feel like that is a bit of a miss. So you got to go Friedl, Elly, Schwarber in this lineup. And I think that lineup would be fantastic. The funny part will be, and I would love to get into this type of an argument with somebody because it only works if Kyle Schwarber's a Red. But there's a certain group of Reds fans that will have a problem with Kyle Schwarber. And we all know what that problem will be. It's because Kyle Schwarber on his career, not much of a batting average guy. Yeah. There's going to be a section of Reds country that's like, oh my gosh, that batting average. He's not hitting 300. He's obviously not good. Right. That'll be so much fun. I really want to have that argument. But again, it's going to require the Reds to spend the money because they're going to have to, I don't know that they have to exponentially outbid other teams. And there's a chance that if they just match the offer that Philadelphia is putting out there, that Kyle Schwarber wants to come home. If the money is right, the situation is lovely for him because they're building a house in Middletown from what some folks have been saying. They have roots in Middletown, both he and his wife, and of course he has kids and things like that, and so he's got family in Middletown. There's a perfect reason to be a member of the Cincinnati Reds as long as the money makes sense for Kyle Schwarber. The lineup looks perfect with him in it, or at least close to perfect. Nothing's ever perfect in the Major League Baseball. And when you're talking about the Reds going up against a team like the Dodgers, who have like 3 times the dollars in their lineup compared to the Reds, sure, you're going to pick the Dodgers lineup over the Reds. But at the same time, this lineup looks a lot closer to theirs with Kyle Schwarber than with any of the other options. So go do it. Stop doing these half measures. Stop doing these other things that you just don't. I would love to see this work because I want to have these discussions about Kyle Schwarber. I've talked myself into it. I think I'm out of the pessimism side and realism. I still understand that there's not a high chance of the Reds doing this. But, man, this would look like a lot of fun. And the reports are starting to intensify. I saw an article from Mark Sheldon that he talked a lot about Kyle Schwarber, but he conceded the same point that the Reds just don't typically spend this much on free agents. But he's writing a lot about them. There's a lot of people that are writing about the feeling that Kyle Schwarber's probably going to make a decision in the next week because the winter meetings begin this Sunday. And there's a lot of folks that feel, as Jeff Passan did, that the winter meetings will not end and he will still be a free agent. There's a lot of feelings that he's going to make his decision by the end of next week. And man, I hope it's Cincinnati. But, and again, the majority is still probably, it's not going to happen. So in that case, there are some options out there that the Reds could look at, albeit nowhere near as good, but Kyle Schwarber light, there's a couple of options out there for the Reds. I encourage you to keep the conversation going with me after the show is over. You can follow me at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs on X, and you can also follow the show at Locked On Reds. I'm on TikTok as well. I'm going to try to pick that back up and just have some discussions about the Reds throughout the offseason, and also a great place for when I have breaking news and stuff like that. Go to TikTok, go to X, all that great stuff. Make sure you follow me there. All right, so, yeah. Let's say that the boring thing happens, the thing that we all expect happens. Look, if you're trying to argue with me and say, Jeff, how could you believe this? I still have a hard time saying that I'm buying into the idea of Kyle Schwarber being a Cincinnati Red for the sole fact that I just don't know that the Reds are going to make that kind of an offer. Like we said, like $64 million is the most in a total contract that they've ever offered through free agency. So it would be a huge, huge, huge change of character for them to do this. But let's be boring for a second and say, okay, it doesn't happen. He goes back to Philadelphia and the status quo continues. So who do the Reds look for then? I've talked a little bit about some guys that I think the Reds could get if they don't get Kyle Schwarber. And for me, the first guy that I want them to get, if it's not Kyle Schwarber, it's Reece Hoskins. Go get Reece Hoskins. Reece Hoskins can even play a little bit of first base for you, where Kyle Schwarber, quite honestly, if you're not starting him at DH, he's probably getting a day off. And if you play him at a different position, maybe it's first base, but you don't feel great about him defensively. He's here to hit dingers and be your DH. Reece Hoskins can be your DH, but he can also play first base when you need him to as well. And so I think that for that, I'd be okay with him if it's not Kyle Schwarber. Plus, Reece Hoskins has 30 homer potential. I believe that, especially at Great American Ballpark. He was a slugger once upon a time when he played for Philadelphia, has gone through a couple of tough seasons with Milwaukee. A lot of injuries really have played a factor there. But albeit he's still been a pretty good slugger when it comes to the slugging percentage statistic, he's still much better at that than most Reds are. And so I think that you could get him on a deal that would make sense for the Reds. It would not be, $20 or $30 million a year. We're probably talking $10 to $12 million a year, and maybe just a 2 or 3 year deal, which again is even more palatable for the Reds, who love giving out the short-term contracts anyway. He won't be near as fun as Kyle Schwarber, but he still will help make your lineup better. He will be lineup protection for Elly De La Cruz. I think that is a clear Elly hits third, Hoskins hits fourth. You can make the argument that Elly could hit second and Hoskins hit third, but ultimately I am not, standing on a table and shouting for Reece Hoskins to always bat in the first inning as much as I would be for Kyle Schwarber. But Reece Hoskins would be my next choice. After Reece Hoskins, I want to go Ryan O'Hearn. If you can't get Kyle Schwarber and you can't get Reece Hoskins, then get Ryan O'Hearn. Ryan O'Hearn's a lefty that doesn't have platoon splits. He hit righties well, he hit lefties well. And he is really good at getting on base and giving you strong at-bats. The power numbers are nowhere near even Reece Hoskins level, much less Kyle Schwarber level, but they are still pretty good. His slugging percentage, his OPS plus would all be very highly ranked. Last year's OPS plus of 127 would have been the best on the team. And he's had a pretty good couple of years ever since leaving Kansas City with Baltimore and then partly with San Diego last year, that Ryan O'Hearn is the kind of guy that you could trust to put behind Elly De La Cruz and give lineup protection to him. So yeah, if you can't get Schwarber and you can't get Reece Hoskins, then go for Ryan O'Hearn. And if for some reason the Reds miss out on all of those three guys, which we all know is still a pretty good possibility because of how much they like to sit on their hands and let everybody do their thing before they jump in and do theirs, then I could be persuaded that Miguel Andujar is fine. Because again, he's a guy that can play every day. He can play some left field for you. He can play first base. He can DH, all the things. And as long as his leg is healthy, I would like there to be some confirmation that his leg got healthy and he can be in the field again, because he was a okay fielder. He was a fine, he's not a detriment out in left field type of guy. And so I think he would be an interesting add too, or an interesting bring back. And you could argue that he would be an add because he'd be able to play every day and play in left field. I think he would be a good option as well. And he would be cheaper than Hoskins. I think he would be cheaper than O'Hearn. I think O'Hearn might actually be a little bit more expensive than Hoskins. O'Hearn's probably somewhere around 13, 14 million. I think Reece Hoskins is 10 to 12. And then I think that Miguel Andujar is less than 10, maybe 8 to 10, something like that. And again, none of those guys are, you have to give them 5-year deals or they're not coming here, that type of thing. So those would be my 3 options, and in that order. I think that's kind of where I would go with that. I'd be curious to see if your thoughts on that too. You know, if it's not Kyle Schwarber, and I know that there are people that are probably screaming at me. It might even be Steve. Steve might be screaming at me from his cruise ship right now. How on earth could you even think it's a possibility for Kyle Schwarber? But I go back to the fact that it's multiple national reporters that are still including the Reds in this. It's the fact that some folks that I've talked to from other teams are saying, man, the Reds are really going after him. It's not just a pipe dream. I labeled it a pipe dream the other day. I think it's more than that. So I don't want to get my hopes up and say that I'm more than 50% sure, because I'm not. I'm not more than 50% sure that this is going to happen, but at the same time, I am much more than a small percentage. Definitely more than 10%. I'd argue it might be more than 20%. I'm probably somewhere around 35% confident that the Reds could do this. But again, that's still 65% confident that they won't do it. So I would love to be wrong. I would love for the Reds to do something totally out of character here. In fact, Nick Kroll, if you're still listening to this point, I dare you, right? Double dog dare you to go out and sign Kyle Schwarber. Do it. Nick Kroll has never taken a risk with this team. And don't give me Jammer Candelaria. I don't think that was a risk. There's not been a risk that Nick Kroll has taken. Been a lot of guys, 1 year with one option or something like that. Or you sign them on a 3-year deal. And maybe this is another way to get the Kyle Schwarber thing done. And I forgot about this as part of a potential contract you could give to him. Give him multiple opt-outs. Do the Nick Castellanos thing if he really wants that. Put it all on the table. Just go out, take a risk, bring in Kyle Schwarber. This team will be better off for it. This fan base will be more fired up for it. Because I just don't think people are lining up to the Reds team store right now to go buy Reece Hoskins jerseys. Or to go buy Ryan O'Hearn jerseys. Or to go buy Miguel Andujar. Miguel Andujar was here. I don't think I saw anybody buying Miguel Andujar jersey. People will line up to buy a Kyle Schwarber jersey. People will line up to buy Kyle Schwarber merchandise. You can make a Kyle Schwarber snow globe. Actually, I would love that. That'd be awesome. But that's the exact sentiment that would be. Kyle Schwarber would be marketable. And there would be a lot more about this that would be so much more fun. Please do that. Please do that. I would love to see it. Love to see it. Dare you, Nick Kroll. Dare you. And that's where we'll end today's podcast. I sometimes try to keep myself disconnected from rumors because I don't want to get my hopes up. But I'm firmly in the category right now that I'm getting my hopes up about this Kyle Schwarber thing. So there's probably going to be a crash out. There's probably going to be an episode where I'm just like, oh, I can't believe it. Just remind me whenever that happens that I said I didn't believe it would happen. And yet I'm still sort of like getting sucked up into it. So I love this team because I get hopeful about things that I have no business hoping for. That'll do it for us today here on the Locked On Reds podcast. Thank you so much. Be with you all throughout the week. Really want to talk about the possibility of Luis Robert. Yeah, I'm saying it. Luis Robert is a possibility. He was listed as a potential trade candidate for the Reds to acquire. And ESPN thinks it's a 60% chance that he's getting traded. We're actually going to talk to Todd Welter from Locked On White Sox a little bit about that, and I'm going to break down my thoughts on the Reds' possibility of acquiring Luis Robert on tomorrow's podcast, so make sure you join us then. Make sure you subscribe. That way you don't miss anything that we've got coming for you all off-season long. Talking Reds every single day here. There's snow on the ground. We got 3 inches here and where I live, and we're going to be talking baseball every single day because we are Locked On Reds every single day.